Hello, today we're going to be talking about some recommendations for the soccer athlete based off of a needs analysis that was previously performed. Some movement patterns that are common in soccer are initiation, transition, and actualization movements. Most of these movements are transitional phase movements, such as like shuffling, backpedaling, jumping, or diving, such as like a goalkeeper, diving for a ball. So these are some key movements that are found in soccer and are essential to the success in the sport. So laying the foundation for these movement patterns is key to an athlete being successful as well as injury prevention. Now, other movement patterns we do see in soccer, such as changing directions, which are known as initiation movements, and then moving at maximal velocity, such as like sprinting. Those are actualization movements. Next, we have muscles and joints that are involved in the sport. So soccer is mainly occurring in the sagittal plane about a frontal axis, which usually involves the hips, knees, and ankle joints. So a lot of lower body action will be seen in the soccer sport. Yes, we have involvement from other body parts, such as your arms and your back and stuff, but the main focus in the sport is your legs. So therefore, we have muscles such as the rectus abdominis, the lats, the teres major, external internal obliques, the quadriceps, the iliopsoas and sartorius muscles. We have the adductor, abductors, glute max medius and minimus, hamstrings, and the gastrocnemius and soleus. So calves are very important in soccer as well. So we just have to make sure everything stays balanced. Energy systems involved. So soccer actually uses all three systems. The ATP PCR system, which is usually used for about 30 seconds, that's used when an explosive movement is needed. So such as a penalty kick or, a punting of a kick or a throw-in even. Those can all be used for the ATP PCR system. Aerobic system does provide constant energy, so during medium intensity. So if we were like jogging up and down the field, or if we were passing the ball to a teammate or something like that, that would be used in the aerobic system. The anaerobic system, or the lactic acid system, that's used during intense efforts. So if you're sprinting, attacking, defending, stuff like that, that's going to require a higher intensity, so therefore that's going to use the lactic acid system. Next is the warm-up and strength training overview. So when performing the needs analysis, it was very clear what the athlete needed, and what kind of workout that you want them to have and plan for them is going to be a more lower body focused workout. So we've got an entire body that's going to get worked out, but the warm up and the strength training, there is a large focus that needs to be on the legs for muscular endurance, for strength training, for fatiguing, things like that. That's all going to be necessary to keep in mind when programming their workout. So by analyzing these movements and these muscles, it's very clear that the lower body is what's going to be need to warm up and strength trained very closely. So some of the exercises that will be implemented are sprints, agility, and strength training. So I added some workouts in here. I bullet pointed them just so I could give you some examples of what I was thinking about adding in. So the sprints, they're uphill sprints, stadium stairs, flying sprints, push start speed sprints, sprint back pedals. So that way we have some different planes of movement happening during the sprints, as well as change of direction. The agility, shuttle runs, tuck jumps, slalom dribbles, ladders, box drills. That's just going to work on foot motion or footwork and kind of get everybody moving. And then the strength training, resistance training is going to be squats, deadlifts, RDLs, barbell cleans, barbell snatches. So Olympic lifts are in there, calf raises, lunges, lateral band walks, and single leg squats. Those are also going to be helpful because, again, it's focusing on lower body, but it includes every body part. So like when we're doing a back squat, we do engage the entire posterior chain as well as the stomach for, bracing the abdomen. So for athletic testing, I chose to do in this order, actually, I put it in this order for the bod pod. So body comp, then the sit and reach test for flexibility, vertical jump test, 40-meter sprint, balsam run, sprint fatigue test, and the Longborough intermittent shuttle test. I put it in this order because it's from least intensive to most intensive. So it goes from, body comp all the way down to aerobic, anaerobic testing. So the purpose of the bod pod is for muscle mass tracking, body fat tracking. This is just to basically measure the body fat, because if we have an increase in body fat, the rate of fatigue on the athlete can be larger. So it's important that we measure that and we make sure that we're making progress. Sit and reach test is for flexibility. It's important to consider this for injury prevention, just because a decrease in flexibility can lead to injuries, especially in soccer with a lot of hamstring, quad, knee, ankle movement. You get a lot of injuries that can occur at those sites. So it's important that we take into consideration the athlete's flexibility and range of motion. So sit and reach test is good to measure that. Vertical jump test, this is used to measure leg power, which is obviously important because, like we talked about, soccer is mainly a lower body sport. So using the legs for kicking and sprinting is going to be important, and this is a good way to measure like a 1 rep type situation. 40-meter sprint, this is used to calculate the maximum running speed and acceleration in an athlete. So you can also pace out like 10, 20 meter, 30 meter, up to a 40 meter. I mean, you can do more too, but I felt like 40 meter was a good spot. So that way you could also pace at the other meter marks to see what your split times are. The balsam run is an agility course that was mainly used for soccer, and it's to test the athlete's ability to change direction, their body control, and their speed. The sprint fatigue test is a test used to measure the athlete's anaerobic capacity and their ability to recover between sprints while still maintaining power. Lastly, the Longborough intermittent shuttle test. It's a running test that includes jogging, running, and sprinting. It's used to simulate the physiological demands of a soccer match. So they get put through a high intensity course, which mimics the needs that the sport would place on the athlete. That way they can condition themselves through it. So like we kind of talked about before, bod pod is associated with or body composition. So this is characterizing and categorizing the workouts based off of how they would be performed or how they need to be performed. So the bod pod tells you about how the body is getting measured with body volume for obtaining the final body composition results. Sit and reach test tells you how to perform it. So you just sit with your legs straight out. Your shoulders should be removed and the soles of your feet are placed flat against the box. So both knees should be locked and pressed flat to the floor. And then you may be pushing yourself to see how far your hamstrings will allow you to go forward. The vertical jump is where the athlete will be standing like sideline against a wall, but sometimes they have this pole here with like little flags on it, like you see in the picture, so that way they can jump up and they can basically hit the prongs or the flags and move them out of the way, and that shows how high they've jumped. So typically an athlete will raise their hand, touch whatever flags they can, and then they'll perform the assessment by jumping up and then moving the rest of the flags out of the way. So, and then you can base your score or your height jump off of the ones that they've removed versus the ones they just touched through their height. 40-meter sprint, that's conducted over 40 meters. So just like I talked about, you can also pace this at different meter marks just to get a split time. But this is just for peak velocity and acceleration scale. So that way you can kind of see where your athletes are at, see if they're improving, see if their times are getting faster. So that's going to be important as well. Obviously, sprinting is a big thing in soccer. We have to make sure that we get from point A to point B and beat our opponents there. So 40-meter sprint is a good way to kind of measure the acceleration that our athletes are producing. So then we have the Balsam Run. The Balsam Run is basically a test that was made for sprinting athletes or soccer players. So you set up the cones how you want to set up the cones for your athlete to run through, and you'll basically create a maze or a track. So you'll have them start at one cone, run to the next cone, and then return to the first cone. And then they'll run from the first cone, run to a third cone, and then back to the first cone. So that way it's kind of a back and forth sprint. So this helps athletes focus on sprinting, acceleration, deceleration, change of motion or change of movement pattern. 2 trials are done, and then the fastest time gets recorded. So it's basically giving the athlete a little bit of a buffer to get used to the track, to figure out what they need to do, and then that way they can execute this as fast as they can, so we can get a good trial run or a good time frame of how fast they're able to do that. Next is a sprint fatiguing test. This is where the cones are placed about 30 meters apart, and you will essentially just have your athlete run to a 30-meter point. You will have a cone there, and then they will walk for a shortened recovery time, and then they will run, sprint again, and then have another slow recovery time. So this is a cycle. It's usually 10 sprints, and they start at 30 seconds, 1 minute, 1.5 minute, 2 minutes. So the sprints just get longer. The recovery time stays the same, but it really gives your athlete a chance to accelerate, decelerate, change of direction again. But this time it allows them to fatigue themselves to the point where their aerobic capacity is taken up. Last is the Loughborough Intermittent Shuttle Test, also known as LIST. This is also a test that requires a lot of aerobic capacity, but this is where the cones are set up like 20 minutes apart or 20 meters apart, and the timing gates are at 15 meters from one end, and then the part A of the test will consist of a 5 by 15 minute exercise period separated by 3 minutes of recovery. So during this period, they'll do a high intensity running, and then you basically can record how they are, their VO2 max. You can record their heart rate. You kind of want to get their VO2 max within a certain part. Now, obviously, this does require prior testing, but it's a good assessment for these athletes who have to do a lot of running. But this test is usually about a 10-minute long test, and they are supposed to be able to keep speed and maintain speed throughout this entire test. And that is the end. And here are the references that I cited and used within my PowerPoint and to help me put together a training plan and workout plan for soccer athletes. Thank you.